Hey, everybody, I'm Zed Kole, and I'm happy to be here on this podcast. Interesting. I think I, realistically, I wouldn't know. I think realistically, I genuinely would not know. You know what I mean? I don't know how I would react to what I'm sure would be an overwhelming change to regular life. You know what I mean? I mean, one of the best things I enjoy doing is taking walks all the time. I wonder, and I do that as a way to kind of step away from everything and clear my mind. I would imagine I would hate it if I can't walk and have, you know, I don't know, imagine, somebody walking up to me all the time or like somebody following me or anything like that. I mean, again,
Mm.
but I can't imagine it. Um, you know what I mean? I think what I'm more be excited about and can speak of, or like why it would be a lottery for me to be able to do this, professionally and full time. um I'd be super excited to see uh all these, I want to say, like industry professionals that I grew up, seeing them do their thing, seeing them behind the scenes. I think that's one perk of actually, becoming famous
Mm.
that I'd be interested in. I'd, be able to have, behind closed doors conversations with Anthony Hopkins or Edward Norton, and like really get a sense of who they are. I mean, I think that's for me possibly the only perk of actually being famous, being big.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
No,
that's, yeah,
absolutely. But to buttress that, so my next question would be, if you got the call from Hollywood today, do you think you're ready?
yeah. I think I'd be ready. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Something creator of Virgin Megastore said, I love, and I always say to my candidates in my day job, which is, if you get an opportunity, somebody rings your phone and tells you, I want you to do this job, and you don't know how to do this job, say yes and learn how to do that job.
Absolutely.
That's how you challenge yourself. It goes back to what we started with. You
Yeah.
have to put something out there to know where you're at so that you can improve on it. Funny, it was always a passion of mine. I literally, as far back as I can remember, I've always loved acting. Uh, but and I did it the most professionally. I want to say I did it back home was in university time. I was in about six university production where I was the lead and all. And I actually did a video clip for, don't want to say a song I wouldn't listen to, but it's a song I wouldn't listen to. Let's say that.
Mm.
Um, and then I, left out of Lebanon for work essentially, and I didn't do anything with acting for upwards of like 10 years. Um, just, I mean, I never stopped liking it, and in fact, that's how I got back into it. I follow all these accounts on Instagram, about acting or about just actors talking about the profession and such. So back in August of 2020, I got like a targeted ad on Facebook for Backstage. I was like, hey man, I have more more time on my hands than I used to.
Yeah.
So I downloaded it, and I just got so lucky on it so quickly. I was able to get a few shorts at first, but then a few roles in feature films, and I've been basically working on that since.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the challenge in being an actor? Like, what's the difficult part about it? Not the career, because we'll get into that a little bit later, or that would be my next question, I guess. But being an actor itself, like, what's the challenge there?
Hmm. I guess that's a multi-layered question. I guess for me, what I find the most challenging is being able to portray myself, within auditions, to really show my best self. Auditions are going to coincide with sometimes that maybe you're not feeling 100%, or you know what I mean, and then you'll end up thinking, man, if I did it this way, then they would have saw it this way, and then maybe I would have gotten the role. So probably like just the audition phase, although I enjoy it, I want to say too. um, but if I want to highlight something that's maybe the most challenging, it's definitely the audition phase.
Hmm. Okay. But I think things now after COVID have kind of changed. So now you're kind of doing self tapes, right?
I mean, for me, because I went back into it in the heart of COVID,
Yeah.
so all I know right now is self tapes, and I think that
Uh
gave me an edge. I look at my self tapes in August and I compare them to self tapes now, and like I cringe when I see my self tapes from August.
yeah,
But like that learning curve would have never happened if I chose to jump in any other time.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Man, that's very interesting because a lot of people talk about I don't want to say the depression, but just the anxiety and the sadness around not being able to go into a room and make eye contact with an agent or
right.
whoever, a casting director. Yeah.
I heard that, and I can imagine why that's the case. I mean, nothing beats being in a room and actually connecting with casting directors and agents. But again, for me, I there's a lot of freedom that self tapes give you that um, I'm not sure that's there for you when you go into a room. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, because I started again doing that right away, I immediately started thinking of ways to improve my self tapes instead of thinking, man, I would have done it better if it was in person. For me, that's not an option, and it never was because I never experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I immediately delved into like, okay, how can I make my self tapes better? And it started with the most basic things, things that I Google and read and be like, yeah, that makes sense. But I might have not thought of on my own, like stuff like, look directly in the mirror, in the camera. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. Yeah, that's my experience with it.
I mean, but that's a good point, man. It's kind of like having, it's like I guess I would compare it to having an open book exam as opposed to having a closed book exam. Closed book exam,
Absolutely.
you have 30 minutes or an hour, and then
Yeah.
in some universities on an open book exam, you got the whole day because it's the open book. What does the professor care, right? So you have time.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
time to improve yourself. Is there a part that you auditioned for that you didn't get? And I mean, I'm sure that happens quite frequently, but is there a part that you really, really wanted that you didn't get?
You know what? What comes to mind is a role that I'm sure a lot of actors can relate to this. Uh, what comes to mind is a role that I thought I had, as in
Okay.
I killed this audition. I'd have this, and then I didn't hear back. So that's one that kind of I find myself thinking back about. Like, I wonder what happened there. And there's so many variables, obviously, that go into the selection process, I'm sure. But yeah, that comes to mind because in my mind, I felt like I definitely gave it my best, but I also felt like I got good feedback from the call, essentially. Um, so I was expecting it. So that's what comes to mind. I don't know if
Mm.
that answers your question, though.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. Is it difficult not to take rejection personally?
Not for me, mainly because those 10 years that I was not doing acting in, I was doing sales. So
Oh,
I'm
okay. All right. Yeah.
well comfortable with rejection. So like I start my morning nowadays, my day job right now is a recruiter. So I literally start my day with about 50 to 60 calls a day. So if I
Okay.
don't get like 30 no's by the time it's noon, I've failed in my day. So like I'm very comfortable with rejection, which helps. And that's a helpful skill I found to have, right? To have thicker skin and to understand that any form of business development, and the business of acting absolutely is business development. It's a numbers game.
That's
So
right. That's right.
particularly when you're starting out, for me as an actor, I obviously apply to things I'm interested in, but I also apply to all things that make sense that I can do.
Yeah.
uh, Not everything I apply to, I'm like, oh, this is, I would love to play this role. No, some of it is, extra here or, line there.
Mhm.
But, anything to kind of gain experience at this point is really what's motivating my choices.
Okay. Are there roles that you say you're not going to play? Like you say, okay, I'm not going to wear a dress, or I'm not going to whatever whatever it
Yeah,
might be.
yeah, sure. So, I mean, depends. So let's say when it comes to commercials, for example, let's say if it's commercials, I'm not comfortable being in a commercial for example, alcohol or, say betting. I actually had to turn down a commercial for a betting, like an online betting app, just
Okay.
because those are things that I don't do personally. I have nothing against people that drink, obviously, or
Yeah.
that gamble,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't be comfortable feeling like I'm promoting those two things when I personally don't do them.
Yeah.
That, from a commercial standpoint. Now, from an acting standpoint, I'm, for example, very comfortable playing somebody that drinks or bets, obviously.
Okay. Okay.
What I'm not comfortable with, the only thing I'm not comfortable with typically is like essentially like intimate scenes. So, I'm comfortable with the build-up, if you will, but actual, let's say, kissing or something heavier than that. That's something that I don't do.
Yeah, you're comfortable with boy meets girl, but beyond that,
Pretty much, yeah.
right? Yeah, I got you.
With camera angles, I've had roles where like
Yeah.
it looked like I was kissing somebody, but I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
not, just
Yeah.
uncomfortably close to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, but that's the magic of cinema, man. That's the magic of camera.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy most about being on set?
Being on set or actually acting.
Well, I think those are two different things. So that's a great question. So actually, like being on set, like the energy
Oh,
and
yeah,
camaraderie.
I absolutely. I definitely that energy for me is magical. I mean, to feel like I'm surrounded by like-minded people, everybody, you know, on a set it is there because they at least share this love of like suspension of belief, basically. So and you can sense that right away. You know, I contrast that with my day job when I'm talking to, literally finance and accounting professionals. So
Mhm.
like, you could feel a mindset shift, right? It's like left brain versus right brain kind of people. And I definitely feel so much more comfortable with, for lack of a better word, for like art motivated people or like art inclined, people.
Creatives, yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
creatives.
Mhm.
So I mean, that's probably my favorite part, feeling like I'm surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much we can talk about Two Face, but I just watched the second episode, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Um, because I don't want Nate to kill us, but
Right.
but
Yeah.
but
I could just see him texting me right now. Don't
yeah,
say
yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah. But how was being on set and working with that crew and with Nate?
It was amazing. It was one of my first projects, really. So I love the energy there. Definitely, Nate is very focused. He knows what he wants on camera, and so I like that because he has no problem telling you, listen, this ain't it, chief. Like,
Yeah,
this is what I want. This is how I'd like it. This is what I'm thinking. And he also leaves you room to kind of portray it as you'd like. So he'll ask you questions like, what do you think the character is thinking right now or doing right now? Um, so as far as Nate goes, that's what I enjoy about working with him. The rest of the crew, what I love there, and I'm repeating myself, I feel like, but again, the energy, it's everybody in that project is in a phase where they just want to work on their craft and be better than they were yesterday. And being around that helps you, pushes you to also try to do your best. Funny, to go back to looking back at things you've done before and be like, man, I could have done that better. I again, so that Nate doesn't kill us, just to compare second episode to the first episode, I feel like you can, from where I'm sitting at least, I feel like you can see everybody's a little bit more entrenched in their role, a little bit easier, let's say, being in their roles, more comfortable in that skin, so to speak. And I feel like you'll see that even more and more.
right.
So
Yeah, are you writing anything yourself? Have you tried that yet?
that's 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 my next mountain to conquer. I really really want to do that. Yeah, I mean, for me, that's my next big thing. It's just obviously, no need to tell you that it's obviously, very challenging. But what's interesting is that I'm sure these are roadblocks I'm putting for myself, because what's stopping me is before I even put any ink to paper, it's what's stopping me is still ideas of like, all right, should I put my attention on a short or should I start with a feature? Like, and I know when I say them out loud that these are dumb things to put as roadblocks, but for some reason, like I'm stuck in pre-production in my head of like, it's funny, every once in a while I'll think of an idea. I'm like, this is the idea that I'm gonna grow. And I'll grow it a little bit in my mind, and then another idea comes to mind and I'll completely drop the first one.
Mm,
Uh, and I still haven't, gotten over that challenge in my mind. I think I'm gonna have to at some point just write anything down, and I have to be comfortable with the idea that whatever I first write is gonna be awful. And I should be okay with that. And that's, back to what we said at the beginning. You have to put yourself out there, hit a mark so that you can improve on it. And I
absolutely.
just need to do that. So I'm probably going to start with like a short, whatever it is, and then, improve hopefully. But that's definitely something I'm thinking about.
Absolutely. I interviewed a guy. Well, I can't just say a guy, like this professor from Cal Berkeley, and him
Nice.
and I,
Wow.
we were talking about like The Godfather, and one thing that we agree upon is that perfection and something being good or great are not synonymous. They're not simultaneous. You
I like
understand what I'm
that.
saying? So like instead of kind of pursuing that perfection, or you just put it out, right? And
Yeah.
then the audience and the people who are following you are going to tell you whether or not
Yeah.
it's good.
I like that. You know what? That's kind of how I think about self tapes. One,
Right, right, right.
yeah, I get what you're saying, and that's very true. I love this, and I love you for the idea too. Like that's definitely okay. That sounds like, yeah, that makes sense to me. You know what's funny? Remember at the beginning of the call, I told you, when I was trying to perfect or like improve on my self tapes, I'd Google stuff, and some of the best things that help were things that I read and be like, duh, I should have, you know what I mean?
Right.
And and I think those are the best ideas, by the way. But that's kind of how I feel about what you just told me now. Like, yeah, like that makes sense. So why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I love that. That's smart.
Are you taking acting classes, or you just kind of?
I I'm not. I did in when I again back in August when I first started to do this. I did take a couple of classes with Plaza Seven. It's an agency in Plymouth Meeting, just like 30 minutes outside of Philly, basically. Um, and the coach there was a guy called Ron Parson. It was amazing coach. And again, it was basically him telling you things that were so helpful that when he told them to you, you'd be like, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they'd want to see. But for some reason, at least for me, weren't things that came to me naturally. But once I was told about them, I was like, yeah, and just implementing those what made the difference. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Does acting make sense though? Right? Like the art of acting.
I To me, it absolutely does. I think it gets heavy uh being who we are. You know what I mean? Growing up, everybody, each one of us, as we grow and we go through things and challenges and heartbreaks and whatever it is, we kind of hold on to armors that end up defining us, right? You act this way because this happened, and you act this way because that happened. For me, I love acting because it's an ability to kind of start fresh, so to speak, and then build on something completely different, and be something different. It's also an ability to express sides of you that you might contain, but don't make sense to be portrayed in your life, or anybody's life. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever watched a movie? I'll give you a very silly example. Have you ever watched a movie like set in the 1600s, and it's like people with swords and whatever it is, and like you watched that and you felt like, wow, like that's awesome. I wish I was as dumb as that sounds, but like I wish I was in that area.
Yeah,
Obviously,
absolutely.
any one of us would be killed in a second, but like
Right,
it
right.
looks good, and you feel like I wonder what I would do if I was there,
Mm,
you know. And that's, I wonder what I would do. That's what acting is. I just, you know, you're there now, you're holding that sword. How would you act? And at the end of any role, there's a little bit of you in there.
that's right.
It's Zed, you know, being a cop in Two Faced. If Zed was a cop, and you know, born and raised in the States, I would that.
Right, right,
uh,
right, right.
uh, yeah, like there's something I'm working on right now where I play a demon, and I love these roles because it's such an abandonment of, like, you have such liberty when you're playing something like that to be like, all right, I think demons, you know, stand on their heads, and you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
can,
Hmm.
the sky's the limit to your creativity. You can decide, you know, what they look like or what they think, or how they react to certain things,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I ran on there, but like I'm so
Oh, no,
passionate about what makes acting, you
no,
know.
absolutely, absolutely. Who is in your upper echelon of actors?
Uh, I mean, I don't know. It's so many. I love Anthony Hopkins.
Oh, he's brilliant, man.
I love Anthony Hopkins. I love how I also love um, how he talks about acting, and how like his method is what I try to kind of use. So you know, if you watch Anthony Hopkins like clips on acting, you'll find that he constantly, almost always says the same thing, whereby he'll take a script and he'll read it on and on without even thinking about his character or anything. He'll just keep reading it and reading it until he almost has the lines memorized. And then once the lines are just, they come naturally as you and I are speaking right now, then he allows his true instincts to convey those messages. You know what I mean? It's less about thinking of, oh, I wonder how so and so would do it, and more so about feeling it and letting yourself react to it, you know, naturally. um and I feel like the less you judge yourself, the better the performance is. Like I could look at my self tapes, and the ones that I'm like, oh, that's terrible, are the ones that I can tell that I'm in my head right now. I'm not, you know what I mean, I'm thinking of how to act this rather than just reacting to whatever the lines are. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I, you know, I would say Edward Norton is also somebody that when I was growing up, I idolized. And you
He's
know what, I
great.
love,
He's great too.
I, amazing, and I loved Edward Norton in particular. I also loved his movie choices. Almost anything he's in, particularly I'm talking like 90s, or you know what I mean, 90s, early 2000s.
Hmm.
Um, but he had a string of movies in the 90s that were just amazing. I mean, American History X, Fight Club.
Speaking of things that you would like to play in, what would be your dream story or your dream character to be?
Um, wow. You know what? I I'm gonna stick with, if you had asked me that question 15 years ago, I would have answered the same. And so that's what I'm gonna go with. Although now I probably can give different answers, but I want to stick with Kid Zed's answer, which would have been Edward Norton's role in Fight Club.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I that's something I would have loved to do. Although literally anything Edward Norton did in the 90s, I would have loved to. Uh,
Yeah.
really, it's great character arcs. I love being able to start a movie as somebody, and then show how that's changing into somebody else. I think that would be so difficult to do. I'm not even, you know, I would love to challenge myself that way.
Yeah. Right. Well, if we could shift lanes just for a minute, the movies that are coming out of Hollywood, how do you feel about them? You think they're good, bad?
Um, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know if this is something that happens as one ages, but like I feel like movies movies aren't what they like. We used to watch a movie, and for years we'd be talking about it.
That's right.
You know, for years we'd be like, man, and we'd be quoting it and like reliving it. What's inside the box? What's in the box? Like how we still reference that movie. We still reference movies that came out 20 and 30 years ago.
That's right.
What movie in the last 10 years do we do that with? None. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like nothing comes to mind. Like,
Well, for me, it probably would be Tropic Thunder.
you know what? You're absolutely right. Tropic Thunder and Step Brothers. Maybe,
Right, right, right. Or Superbad, right? Like,
correct.
But I think I know where you're going, and we're having less
dramatic movies.
Right. We're having less and less classics, right? Like
yes.
But I think that's the downside of flooding the market. Netflix, Amazon, even YouTube, right? Like, I think things right. And because it's this mass production, it's this assembly line, content.
Attention is so limited.
Yes.
You can only grasp so much. I guess like the only movie I can think of in recent years that I watched and I like it left something with me. What was it called? It was actually a foreign movie. Oh God, I miss it now. It was an Asian movie. It was a Korean movie. And it was just brilliant. It was such a
Parasite.
I
haven't watched that one yet, but everybody says it's great. I'm because it's on Netflix over here now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's excellent. I mean, it's excellent. It's just because it's a new idea again, and it's very new. It's something that's gonna stay with you. You're gonna remember that for a while. Yeah. So, and that's my kind of like my favorite kind of movies. Like movies that, like, once the movie is done, it's almost like that's when your viewing of it starts, almost to an extent, because you know the credits roll and you're almost still replaying it in your head, and you're like, oh, why did he do that? Why did she do that? Why did this happen?